I bet they have like a full body rash that's contagious and oozing. And
oh my gosh.
I'm sure they have athlete's foot.
We've been called weirdos before.
I hope it's a steamy summer for you and your spouse. Hey friends, welcome to Fridays with Dave and Ashley here on the XO Marriage YouTube channel, where you get real marriage advice from real people just like us. Welcome to summer. I know for a lot of folks, school's out. I apologize in advance for any children screaming and playing loudly sounds that you hear, because our kids are home for the summer now. And so it's an exciting time.
Yes.
I hope it's a steamy summer for you and your spouse. And so we've got a great topic today. This past week on our Instagram, which is at Dave and Ashley Willis. If you don't follow us on Instagram, we would love to have you over there. We made a post that was just about what to do when you find yourself attracted to someone of the opposite sex other than your spouse. When you have a connection or you feel a sense of attraction to somebody who you're around, maybe at work or wherever, what do you do with that? Mm-hmm. And it created some great conversations. It was a ton of engagement. And so we thought, you know what, let's make a video about it and kind of continue the conversation.
We're talking about this because in the Bible, it actually talks about when it comes to temptation, it's very specific about how we are supposed to, as Christians, flee temptation, okay? When we are talking about if we're attracted to someone who is not our spouse, you know, of the opposite sex, that we find ourselves like our heart fluttering a little bit. We want to talk to them a little bit more. Maybe our eyes light up, or we find ourselves wanting to dress better around this person. It's really dangerous territory. And so we put out on Instagram, we said, basically, we need to do what the Bible says. We need to flee temptation, avoid it at all costs. I mean, we can't help noticing that someone's attractive. That's just being a human being. We can't help but notice someone. But what we can control is whether or not we keep on noticing them, whether or not we keep on staring at them and then like feasting on the fantasy, so to speak. Like we're not supposed to do that. We had a lot of people write us and say, I kind of agree and disagree. Several people were like, well, what about self-control? Like, why can't we just have our self-control, you know, one of the fruits of the Spirit? And I totally get where they're coming from, but to me, what I hear behind that, and this may not be the case necessarily, but what I hear behind that when people tend to ask that question, we've been doing this work a long time. Usually it's, but I really like spending time with this person and I haven't done anything with them. When you hear someone say, well, we just have a little banter, dangerous territory.
Yeah.
Dangerous territory. I've never seen it go anywhere good. Never. And it might be that you yourself have no intention of this becoming romantic. Like you really do see it as a banter, but what you don't know is how they really feel about it. You don't know what's going on in their mind. And so that's where it gets so dangerous. And that's why it's so clear in the Bible that we don't play with temptation. We don't go to the edge and not jump, but just kind of look down and see how far it can go. We don't do that. We flee temptation. It literally is telling us to run the other way. And so what does that look like, sweetie? How do we flee the temptation of finding someone attractive and just trying to put some boundaries in place? How do we do that?
First off, listen, it's not a sin to notice that someone is an attractive person.
Oh, no.
Like you're gonna notice people on TV and in real life, just like, that's an attractive person. That part is not a sin, but what happens where it becomes a sin, where it becomes dangerous, is where we lean into that in our mind and in our actions, like Ashley was talking about, where we try to be around that person more. We play into the connection that we feel. We start thinking about them in our mind. You know, we start, and that thinking can like lead into fantasies. We start saying, I hope they notice what I'm wearing today. I mean, it can be stuff like that. So what do we do instead is we go out of our way to really just not be around that person. Now, there are times where maybe you're forced to work in close proximity with someone where you feel a connection, you feel an attraction, and maybe it's the close proximity that leads to the attraction in the first place. It's like, I'm having to work around this person, we're having to talk and work a lot and share, and we're in the trenches together, and it creates this bond. And then what do? I think that you've got to be so intentional in those settings to put clear boundaries in place, to try to not do any unnecessary communication with that person, to not have these separate text threads where you're sharing jokes and inside things, where you are trying to really avoid that person and not lean into the connection. And then you might have to like even do some like tricks where you just like, I'm going to start picturing them having some like really gross stuff about them. Like I bet they have like a full body rash that's contagious and oozing. And
oh my gosh.
I'm sure they have athlete's foot. And I'm sure that, and it's just like list out a whole bunch of stuff that they have. I've had a number of those things.
Oh so my, like, that is not true. Wow.
I've not had that.
Wow. Yeah.
You might have to just kind of like do some things in your own mind to try to intentionally make that person less attractive. One thing somebody told me years ago, he was a pastor, and I thought this was great. He wasn't telling it just to me. It was like in a sermon. Listen, I know we men were wired up visually. Women are visual too, by the way. Women notice when a man's attractive, but he was talking to the guys. He said, you see a woman throughout the day and she catches your eye because your eyes are just wired that way. I want you to tell yourself over and over again, every time you even see someone someone that you might find attractive, instantly say, that's not my wife. That's not my wife. And what it does is it constantly puts your wife back on the front of your mind. It reminds you that your wife is the only standard for beauty, that you have eyes only for her, and that no other woman can measure up because they are not your wife. They are not the one who's pledged their heart and life to you. You want to lean into that. You just want to be excited to get home and see your wife, because all these other women, they're not my wife. There's no way they could ever take that place in my heart, my mind.
Right.
And I don't want to give them the thought, I don't want to give them the focus that rightfully belongs to her. And ladies, you can do the same thing. You know, that's not my husband. You know, yeah, he might be funny or might make me feel connection or he might be attractive, but no, that's not my husband. So I want to back away from that and I want to lean into reconnecting with my husband.
Definitely. You know, we see people kind of mess or play with fire, so to speak, in this dynamic when maybe they're flirting all day with this other person and then they come home and they're kind of worked up and then they kind of fulfill that desire by maybe making love to their spouse. And you guys, that is so heartbreaking. And you may tell yourself that it's okay because I didn't do anything with that other person, but you did in your mind. Like, I mean, Jesus talks about to even look with lust is really to commit adultery. I mean, really, and that's such a high standard. And so it's just messing with fire, and you are believing a huge lie that you're not going to get burned. And also, how heartbreaking for your spouse to be the body that is fulfilling all the lust you felt for that other person. Okay? How heartbreaking.
Yeah.
We don't want to be that. We've got to be faithful in mind, body, and spirit. And so that takes us being very intentional about what we do. And I know this isn't how the world sees things. Like, this isn't how the world does it. But as Christian people, we don't follow the way of the world. We follow what God calls us to do. We follow the Bible. And so, yeah, we might look like a weirdo. We've been called weirdos before. Like, we've had people at first be like, that's kind of weird that you do that you have those boundaries. But later on, they'll say, I see why you do it.
Because
I see why you do it.
What the world calls normal is messed up. And so I think being weird by the world standards is actually really good, because what's weird by the world standard is being committed, being in a long-term marriage, having eyes only for each other, wanting to do things God's way. The world looks at that. If the world calls it weird, then man, make me a weirdo, right? Because that's what works. It might be different. It might be the narrow road and not the wide path, but that narrow road is what leads to life and healing. And God wants you. He wants you to look a little bit weird to the world sometimes, because what the world's doing isn't working.
That's right. And I want to address, we got some questions this way, and I really want to address a group of people watching this and agreeing with everything we're saying, but deep in your heart, you're at a point in your marriage where you are so lonely. You know, we had several people reach out, men and women, and say, you know, right now in my marriage, we barely talk. We're not sleeping together. I just don't feel connected to my spouse. What do I do with that? Like, what do I do with that? Because really, in essence, you're primed to be attracted to someone else because you feel so lonely, you know? And we're very vulnerable when we're in that state. And so what would you say to that person, honey? Because that is, I mean, I'm glad they see their own position kind of where they are.
It's such an honest, vulnerable, and even heartbreaking scenario. And so I appreciate your honesty. And our hearts hurt with you. I mean, so much of what we do here at XO Marriage is for you. It is for those folks who feel alone in their marriage, that feel hopeless, that feel like they're just stuck. And there are so many resources to help you get unstuck. So don't believe the lie that it's always going to be broken like this. My only hope for happiness is to try to find connections outside my marriage. But lean in and start pursuing your spouse, even if it doesn't feel like they're pursuing you in return right now. We have help available. I encourage you to go to xomarriage.com/help. Connect with one of our trained, amazing mediators who can meet with you by phone or by Skype. We want to walk with you through this. You don't have to figure it out on your own. But what you shouldn't do in that vulnerable state is to try to get those needs met in relationships with the opposite sex other than your spouse, because that's only going to sabotage your marriage. And yeah, it might feel good in the moment to feel seen and feel heard and feel a connection with someone when you're not feeling it at home, but it's playing with fire. You got to lean back into your marriage and do everything you can to bring healing to that relationship. And we want to help you in that process.
You know, one of my favorite quotes that Dave has put out there, and you guys may have heard this, is don't let temporary pleasure lead you to permanent regret. And I know that's heavy, especially if you are one of these people who are describing this just in a really vulnerable position. But it's important that we remember this because we are human beings. You know, we are vulnerable at times and we have frailty. And sometimes, you know, our need to fulfill the loneliness we feel or to have maybe sexual needs fulfilled can lead us to do things that we never, ever thought we would be capable of. But I want you to know that no matter what you're facing, that God is with you and He is for you and He will help you through this day by day. day. And I think if you are feeling lonely in your marriage, this is a time more than any other time to really deepen your faith, really call out to God. He sees you in this, and He doesn't want you to feel this loneliness. You know, there's a place inside of us that only God can fill. And I think sometimes we expect our spouse to fulfill that, but really we need God. You know,
You need Jesus.
regardless of where our marriage is, we need to make sure that we're putting God first. And so especially in these times where we do feel like we're really open to temptation in this area, we need to really call out to God, because He will help us. It says He always gives us a way out. I mean, it literally says that in the Word. He will give us a way out.
There's always a way. So look for that exit door, guys. You feel stuck in a situation
Of the temptation,
that's not healthy. For not exit from marriage.
Yes.
Not exit from marriage, but exit from the
A way out of the
unhealthy
temptation.
And God will keep you. He'll keep you in your marriage if you're focused on that. And not only keep you in it in a survival way, but to really help you thrive and heal within that marriage. I think a lot of folks get in this dynamic where they're having these feelings for somebody, and maybe it's coming from a vulnerable place because their own marriage is hurting and they don't know what to do with that. Well, just share this video widely. I think that there are folks out there that would really be encouraged by this. And this video might be a step in helping save their marriage, help save them from taking that toxic step into an affair. And man, if we can prevent an affair, if we can prevent a marriage from breaking up, that is a generational impact. And so many people are blessed as a result.
Yes.
So join us in that. Thanks so much. Leave comments here. We love reading your comments. Join the conversation. Connect with us on Instagram at Dave and Ashley Willis. We'd love for you to be part of the conversation there as well. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys next time. God bless.